Hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about the importance of keeping a book of shadows. Now for those of you who are members of Full Moon Circle, when I used to run it at Wayne State University, probably remember seeing this. This is my book of shadows, and I used to carry this book of shadows with me on the campus of Wayne State University. I had it in my book bag, and yes, it was heavy, so hopefully in the future, as I get older, I won't have any back problems, because this is heavy, and it's heavy with spells. I have spells going back 10-20 years. Spells I've done with my coven, spells I've done with friends and associates. I have different handouts that I've been given from people, spells that have been given to me, spells that I haven't done yet, rituals that I've done, rituals that I put on, rituals that I've been a part of. So this is kind of, it's very historical for me, and it's really something that I can look back on and be very proud of it. So having a book of shadows is more than just keeping your spells in it, or recipes for potions or whatever. It's something that you can go back and look at, and there's a bit of nostalgia about it too, because when you're looking at old rituals that you've done in the past, it sort of takes you back. Oh, I remember this person, or I remember when we got together and we did this ritual and whatever. So it's very enlightening, just going back and look at how you've progressed. Also see how you progressed in the craft, and see how your magical ability has grown over the years. So it's very important to keep a book of shadows for that reason alone, and it helps you grow. And it's good to just sit down and write rituals and put it in your book of shadows, especially if you're in a coven. You can give that book of shadows to people in your coven and have them copy it. Or nowadays it's a little different than it was back in the old days. You don't have to copy everything by pen or whatever. You can just Xerox it. Some people like to do it the old-fashioned way, but I am a techno-pagan. I just have too many other things to do to just write it out all the time. But you can say that that's a magical thing too, just to sit down and just write out the spell, and say it in your head as you're writing it out. And that's very magical too. It depends on how much time you have, and if that's something that interests you. So I'm not trying to say that that's not important. I do think that's important, to sit down and write it out yourself, longhand. But in today's fast-moving society, it might not be the most practical thing. So you also want to keep that in mind too. The important thing is to have one. I think every witch, or anyone who's into the craft or into magic, should have some type of a book of shadows, or magical diary, or something where they can keep record of how they progress. Because you can look back 10 years ago and say, hey, I remember when I was doing this, or I remember when I was confused about this or whatever. But now I've overcome that. I've become a lot better in my magical practice. You can also take your book of shadows and open it up and look at the different phases of the moon, the different aspects of the stars, and see where they were when you did the ritual, and say, hey, this is probably why the ritual worked, because I did it during this phase of the moon. Or maybe this is the reason why it didn't work out so well, was because there was a Mercury retrograde during that time. Of course you want to check and see if there's a Mercury retrograde before you do the spell, but let's say that you overlooked that, and you go back and you look and say, hey, I need to pay more attention when I do this, or I need to pay more attention, when I'm doing that or whatever. Also, when you look back at your Book of Shadows is sort of it tells a story also. Sorry, my webcam is acting crazy. Anyway, um, it tells a story because you remember doing rituals with people you may not be acquainted with right now, or people who have moved out of the state, or people who are no longer on this plane of existence. So it's very good record keeping. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have a Book of Shadows or a magical diary or something along those lines, think about getting one, because it will enhance your magic, and it will make you better at what you do. So this is my Book of Shadows. Hope you guys have yours. If you don't have one, I recommend you getting one. If you ever plan on putting together a coven, this is a great thing to have. And also, there's a lot of rituals in here that I've done over and over again and repeated, and it's good to have a record of that also. Especially if you're in a coven, or if you started a coven, you can say, hey, this is how I do things, and you can look at that and you can add something to it if you like. Very good thing to have. So I can't stress it anymore. So if you don't have one, I recommend you getting a Book of Shadows, putting it together. One other thing I will say is, along with your Book of Shadows being a collection of spells that you do, you can also take different spells within different books that you've written. I mean, not that you've written, that different books that you've read, I'm sorry, and you can put that in your Book of Shadows and use that as a reference too. So I recommend it. I can't stress it anymore, guys. You really should get one if you're interested in that type of thing. Okay, so get your Book of Shadows or a magical diary or something along those lines. It will definitely help you out in your magical doings. So until next time, love is the law, and peace.